If you are new here, welcome. And if you have been here before, you already know we do not hold back. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications because this one is going to shake you. Ezinne saw him buy oranges. That was the thing that broke her open. Not the shock of seeing his face, not the sound of his laugh floating across the busy shopping mall in Abuja, not even the way he placed his hand on the small of that pregnant woman's back, like he had been doing it for years. It was the oranges. Because Ebuka had always hated oranges. He used to push them to the edge of his plate at Christmas, scrunch his nose at the smell, tease Ezinne about her obsession with them. And here he was, dead for 8 months, standing at a fruit stall in Jabi Lake Mall, selecting oranges for another woman's basket. Ezinne's shopping bag slipped from her hand and hit the floor. Chiamaka bent to pick it up without looking. Ezinne, I said the shoes were overpriced, not that the whole mall was on. She stopped. She had followed Ezinne's gaze. What are you looking at? Ezinne could not answer. Her throat had sealed itself shut. The man was laughing now, throwing his head back the way Ebuka always did when something genuinely amused him. That full-body laugh that used to make her fall in love with him all over again at random moments. He was wearing a blue kaftan. He looked healthy. He looked rested. He looked alive in every way a dead man had no right to look. Ezinne, Chiamaka grabbed her arm. You are shaking. That is Ebuka. The words came out flat and certain, without trembling, without drama, like a statement of weather, like a fact that had always been true and was only now being spoken aloud. Chiamaka's eyes snapped back to the man. That is not... Ezinne, that cannot be it is him. Ezinne was already moving. She did not run, she walked. Steady, deliberate, her heels quiet against the tiled floor of the mall, her eyes locked on the back of his head. Chiamaka hissed under her breath and followed. They were 20 feet away. Then 15. The pregnant woman said something, and he leaned down to hear her better, dipping his head close to hers with a practiced intimacy of a man who had been doing this long enough that it was muscle memory. 10 feet. Then he straightened and turned and saw her. The world seemed to pause for exactly 3 seconds. His face did what she would never forget. It collapsed first, something raw and terrified flashing across his eyes, his lips parting slightly like her name had tried to escape before his brain caught it and swallowed it back down. And then, with a composure that made her stomach turn, he rearranged his face into blankness. He looked away. He turned back to the woman, said something soft, guided her gently toward the escalator with his hand on her back. He was going to walk away. He was going to look at the woman he had been married to for 12 years and walk away. Ezinne's feet moved faster. Ebuka! He did not stop. Chukwuebuka Nwosi. The name hit him like a stone between the shoulder blades. His steps slowed. The pregnant woman looked up at him curiously. He touched her elbow and murmured something as she smiled and moved toward a nearby bench, lowering herself slowly onto it with the careful movements of a woman deep in her 3rd trimester. He turned around. His face was the face of a stranger performing calm. "Sister?" he said, and his voice was steady, bored almost, the voice of a man speaking to someone he had never met. Ezinne stared at him. She stared at him like you stare at something that should not exist, not with fury, not yet, but with the slow burning disbelief of someone watching reality rewrite itself in real time. "You have a scar," she said quietly, "on your left knee. You fell from your cousin Dozie's motorcycle in 2009 at your uncle's burial in Aka. I cleaned that wound with cotton wool soaked in Dettol, and you cried and told me men were not supposed to cry, and I told you that was the most foolish thing I had ever heard." She took one step closer. "Your mother's name is Adaize. You are afraid of deep water. You snore on your right side, and you hate oranges. You have always hated oranges." She glanced at the fruit bag in his hand. "So, who exactly are you buying them for?" Something moved behind his eyes. Something cracked. But he held it. He held the blankness on his face like a mask strapped too tightly, and he said nothing. And the silence between them was the loudest thing in the entire building. Chiamaka appeared at Ezinne's shoulder. Should I call someone? No. Ezinne did not break eye contact with him. We are going to follow him, and we are going to find out exactly who he has become. They did not confront him again that day. They let him leave. They watched him help the pregnant woman into a black SUV, memorized the plate number, and stood in the parking lot long after the car had gone. Chiamaka was already searching online, already making calls, already doing the things she did best. By evening, they had an address, a church, Sunday service, 1 week away. Ezinne drove home alone that night and sat in her car outside her flat for 45 minutes without moving. 8 months ago, she had stood over a closed casket in the rain and told herself that love was not supposed to end this way. 8 months ago, she had held her mother-in-law's hand at the graveside and accepted condolences from people whose names she could not remember. 8 months ago, she went to the bank 2 weeks after the burial and discovered that 1.7 million naira had been removed from their joint account in 2 quiet transactions days before his so-called accident, and she had sat in her car then too, in almost exactly this same way, staring at nothing, understanding that grief was not always simple. Now she understood something else. She was not a widow. She had never been a widow. She had been fooled. She went inside, made herself a cup of tea she did not drink, and began to plan. Drop a comment right now and tell us, did you see this coming? And if you are watching from outside Nigeria, tell us your country. We want to know where our family reaches. The church was called Fountain of Grace Interdenominational Ministry, and it sat on a quiet street in Gwarinpa behind a pale yellow fence with a hand-painted mural of a white dove. Ezinne and Chiamaka arrived 20 minutes before service began, dressed simply, drawing no attention. They took seats near the back. The hall was filling steadily. Women in lace blouses and head ties, men in flowing agbada, children already bored and squirming. It smelt of fresh paint and floral perfume and something almost like peace. He walked in at exactly 5 minutes to 10. He was wearing a white embroidered kaftan this time, and he had a Bible tucked under his arm, and he walked through that hall like a man who had earned his place there, nodding at people, shaking hands, smiling that smile. The pregnant woman was beside him, glowing, her wrapper printed in gold and ivory, her gaily tied high and proud. Members greeted them like beloved fixtures. An older woman patted his cheek and called him our son, and a man clapped him on the back and said something that made them both laugh. Ezinne watched every second of it without blinking. "I want to vomit," Chiamaka whispered. "Not here," Ezinne said. The pastor introduced him midway through the service, calling him forward as a testimony of what God could do with a surrendered life. He stood at the podium and spoke with a voice that was steady and warm and full of scriptural references, and Ezinne listened to him talk about new beginnings and divine restoration and the mercy of starting over. And something inside her went very, very quiet. After the service, in the car park, she walked straight to him. He saw her coming and the Bible slipped slightly in his grip. The pregnant woman was talking to another woman nearby, not looking. He stepped forward quickly, intercepting Ezinne before she could get close enough to be overheard. "Please," he said, and it was the first real word he had given her. Low, urgent, not a greeting, a plea. Ezinne said, "You stood at a podium today and preached about mercy. I sat there and listened to every word." She tilted her head. "Do you want to tell me where you found the nerve?" His jaw tightened. "Not here, please, not in front of." "Her name is Sister Obioma, yes, your wife." The word came out of her like a blade drawn slowly. "Is that what they call her? Because the last time I checked, I was your wife. I stood in a court registry in Lagos 12 years ago, and I signed a document that made me your wife. And unless you have a death certificate that overrules mine, that has not changed." He looked around quickly. "Ezinne, Do not say my name like we are friends." His shoulders dropped. For a moment, he looked like what he was. Not a man of God, not a new creation, not a fresh start. Just a man caught. Just a man who had run as far as he could and been found anyway. "Let us go somewhere and talk," he said. They found a corner of the car park away from foot traffic. Chiamaka stood close enough to hear everything, far enough to let Ezinne have the space. He leaned against his car and looked at his own hands for a long time. "My company collapsed," he said finally. "You know that." Ezinne said, "I was there. I watched it happen. I never once made you feel small for it." "You did not have to." His voice came out rougher than he intended. "Every time your phone rang with another promotion, every time your colleagues sent you flowers, every time you paid school fees for your younger sister and settled your mother's rent and did all the things I was supposed to be doing, you did not have to say a word, Ezinne. I felt it." "You felt your own shame," she said, "and you decided it was my fault." He did not answer that. "Tell me about the accident," she said. "Tell me how you arranged it. I want to hear you say it." He exhaled slowly. He had a contact, he said, a man he knew from his logistics days who dealt in certain things that could not be spoken in church car parks. A vehicle, a body, a road accident victim whose family could not be traced, whose records were managed through another contact in the right department. Dental falsification. It had cost him some of the money. The rest he took with him. "The money," Ezinne said softly. "The 1.7 million in our joint account." He looked away. "I worked for that money too, Ebuka. You know that. I was not a passenger in that marriage. I built that account with you." "He know," he said quietly. "And you took it. You took it and you bought yourself a new name and a new church and a new pregnant wife, and you left me standing over a casket." Her voice did not rise. It got quieter, if anything, and somehow that was worse. "I cried for you. Do you understand that? I cried for you. I held your mother when she screamed at your graveside. I sat alone in our house for weeks, listening to the silence, because I thought you were dead. I thought I had lost you." He opened his mouth. "Do not apologize," she said immediately. "Do not you dare apologize to me right now, because I am not ready to hear it, and I cannot be responsible for what I will do if you try." He closed his mouth. She looked at him for a long time, really looked at him, at the lines around his eyes that were new, at the grey beginning to thread through his beard, at the man she had once kissed in a rain-soaked doorway in Lagos Island when they were 24 and 28, and the world felt enormous and full of promise. She had loved him completely and without reservation. She had loved him through the business failure and the silences and the cold bedroom and the mornings when he would not meet her eyes at breakfast. She had loved the wreckage of him and thought it was enough. It had not been enough. Not because her love was insufficient, but because he had not wanted to be saved. He had wanted to escape. "You have until next Sunday," she said. "You will walk into that church and you will tell Obioma the truth. Every word, your real name, your real history, what you did to your first marriage, what you stole. She deserves to know who is sleeping beside her and whose child she is carrying." She picked up her handbag from where she had set it on the bonnet of his car. She began to walk away. "Ezinne?" She stopped but did not turn around. "I thought I would find peace," he said, starting over. "I thought it would feel something." "And does it?" A long silence. "No," he said. She walked away. "Stay with us. We are almost at the end and you don't want to miss what happens next. If this story is hitting close to home, drop a like and keep watching. We are not done." She did not sleep that night, not properly. She lay on her side in the dark of her flat and stared at the far wall and let the years move through her, not painfully, not the way grief moves, but slowly, the way water moves when the current has finally decided on a direction. She thought about the morning she and Ebuka had moved into their first flat together in Surulere. The way they had eaten fried plantain on the bare floor because the dining table had not arrived yet, laughing about nothing, his hand finding hers between bites. She thought about the last real conversation they had before the silence swallowed them. She could not even remember what it had been about. She thought about the day she had stood in the bank and learnt about the missing money, how she had pressed her hands flat on her thighs in the plastic chair and breathed slowly, and told herself that grief made people do strange things, that maybe he had withdrawn the money for something she had not known about, that she would figure it out, that she was strong enough to figure it out. She was strong enough, she had just been answering the wrong question. She got up before dawn and made proper tea this time and sat at her kitchen table with her hands around the mug, and for the first time since Jabi Lake Mall, she allowed herself to feel everything she had been holding back with both hands. The fury, the humiliation, the grief she now understood had been double because she had not only lost a husband, she had lost the version of herself that trusted him completely. That Ezinne was gone. She was not sure yet what was growing in the space the old one had left behind, but it was something. It was already something. The following Sunday, she did not go to the church. She did not need to. Chiamaka called her at 12:30. She said, "He did it," without preamble. "I sent Auntie Ngozi to go and watch. He did it, Ezinne. He stood up in front of the whole church. He told them everything." Ezinne set her mug down very carefully. "Obioma?" she asked. She left the service halfway through, went straight to her sister's car outside and did not come back in. Chiamaka paused. They say she did not cry. She just sat in the car with the window down and stared at the road. Ezinne knew that feeling with her whole body. "Good," she said, and she meant it, not cruelly, but the way you mean it when someone else has been spared from carrying a lie any longer than necessary. Obioma deserved the truth, however it arrived, however it hurt. Truth was the only thing that gave a person the chance to make a real choice. 2 days later, Ezinne went to the police. She brought everything. Bank statements showing the joint account withdrawals, their marriage certificate, the burial records, a copy of the original accident report from the Federal Road Safety Corps, and a sworn written account of the confrontation in the church car park. Inspector Daike was a small, precise man with reading glasses and an economy of expression that she respected. He read through everything twice. He asked her several questions. He did not express surprise. She had the impression that Inspector Daike had stopped being surprised by human beings sometime around the early part of the previous decade. This would take some weeks, he told her. The falsification of records is the most complex part, but we will move. Take whatever time you need, Ezinne said. I am not going anywhere. He moved in 6 weeks. On a Thursday morning, Chukwuebuka Chuedo Nukoso, alias Brother Obiora, was arrested at the house in Gwarimpa. The charges were read in full: conspiracy to fake death, falsification of official records, theft of jointly owned marital funds, and obtaining property by deception. He was handcuffed at the gate in the same street where neighbors had greeted him as a man of God. Ezinne was not there to see it. She had chosen not to be. She had given her statement, signed where she was asked to sign, and left the police station with her bag over her shoulder and her face calm. Chiamaka was waiting outside with 2 cups of cold zobo and an expression that asked a question without words. Ezinne took the cup, drank, let the cold sweetness settle. "How do you feel?" Chiamaka asked. Ezinne thought about it honestly, the way she had learned to think about things in the last several months, without performance, without the pretense of being fine, but also without collapsing into what was easy. She said, "I feel like someone opened a window in a room that had been closed for a very long time." Chiamaka nodded slowly. "The money, do you think they will recover any of it?" "Some, maybe. Whatever is left," she shrugged. "I have been working. I will keep working. I replaced worse things than money this year." She paused. "I replaced the whole belief system." They stood in the afternoon light outside the police station and finished their drinks and did not say very much else because some things did not need more words than they had already been given. That evening, Ezinne drove back to Lagos, not because she had to. She was not expected back at work until Monday. She drove back because she wanted to, because that city was hers, had always been hers, and she had let grief push her through it like a ghost for 8 months, and she was done with that now. She drove with the windows down and the music up and the night air thick and hot off the expressway. And when she passed the exit for the road where she and Ebuka had once rented that flat in Surulere, she did not slow down. She kept driving. She got home just before midnight, stood in her doorway for a moment and looked at her flat, her furniture, her books on the shelf, the small framed print above the kitchen door that said something about being rooted and still reaching. She had bought that print herself. She had always bought the things that mattered to her herself. She changed out of her clothes, washed her face, and stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long moment. She looked at herself the way she had not looked at herself in months, not searching for signs of damage, not cataloging loss, but just looking, seeing. The face was the same face. There was more in the eyes than there used to be. She was not sure that was a bad thing. She turned off the bathroom light and went to bed and slept, finally and completely, the way a person sleeps when they have put something down that they should have put down a long time ago. Chukwuebuka Nukoso went to trial 4 months later. Ezinne testified calmly, answered every question, and left the courtroom without looking at the dock. She heard later that he had wept when the verdict was read. She did not know what to do with that information, so she set it aside. Obioma had the baby, a girl. She named her something that meant endurance in Igbo. Ezinne hoped the child would grow up knowing her own name, knowing her own worth, and never settling for a man whose peace required her silence. She hoped that for every woman, actually. Some months later, on an ordinary Tuesday evening, Ezinne sat on her balcony with a bowl of oranges and her phone and the kind of quiet that is not empty but full of her own breath, her own presence, her own unhurried life. She thought about what she would say if anyone asked her what the lesson was, what the point of it all had been. She thought she would say this: sometimes the person you grieve is not the person you thought they were. And sometimes the life you are so afraid of losing, the shared account, the shared name, the shared future, was already a smaller life than the one waiting on the other side of the truth. She would say, not everything you lose is a loss. And then she would eat her orange and mean every word. That is the end of Ezinne's story. If this moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of someone, drop a comment below and let us know. We read every single one. And please tell us where you are watching from tonight. Nigeria, UK, United States, Canada, South Africa, wherever you are, we're glad you are here. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and if you are not yet subscribed, now is the time. We have more stories coming and they only get more powerful. See you in the next one.